All right, welcome everybody. It is good to see you all. I hope everyone is healing or feeling better. I know we've had some sickness this week, and I've warned the speakers that that's been going on. So just giving everyone a little grace this week. We have Dr. Keith Schneider and Matt Krug with us. The Krug or Krug?
It's Krug. No worries.
Okay, sorry. With us this week and to talk about food safety and answer any questions about commercial kitchens and all sorts of things that you have questions about. Thank you to everyone who posted. Basically, how I think the day should go is that what we'll do is we'll have both Matt and Keith introduce themselves, tell you a little about themselves, and then I'd like to go around the room and just have each of you tell them what your product is and kind of what setting you create your product in. So if you're in a shared kitchen or if you're at home, and then we're going to go through your questions that you submitted and then open it up to just, you know, kind of impromptu questions. So with that, I am going to pass it to Keith, and then we'll come at the end, we'll do a preview. So Keith, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Keith Schneider. I'm a professor in the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition. I have been studying food safety microbiology now for about 22 years at the university. Also spent 10 years out in industry. So I've been doing this for, well, quite a bit of time.
And I'll go. So yeah, I'm Matt Krug, and I'm also with the University of Florida. I'm a state specialized extension agent in food science. So, and I'm actually based down in Southwest Florida. So my office is in Immokalee, about 4 or 5 hours south of Gainesville. But I do see Keith a lot and work closely with him a lot, even though we're that far apart. And I've been here about almost 5 years now, and I do a lot of teaching the food regulatory workshops along with Keith for all the different food regulations. And then down here, and then starting to get across the state, but down here, there's a shared kitchen in the town of Immokalee, and I've worked pretty closely with them to help some of the entrepreneurs in there get their businesses through the regulations and things like that. So I was just reading through the questions, and some of them I think I have a good idea on, and some of them I don't, but definitely I know there's a lot of confusion with the regulations, so we just got to talk through it, and you'll figure it out. Don't get discouraged. So I'll stop there.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so just to go around kind of my screen, I'm just picking who's at the top. So Debbie, do you mind introducing yourself and your product, and then just saying a little about where you produce? Oh, Debbie, you're on mute.
Just remembered. Hi, I'm Debbie Campbell, and I produce lemon nut balls that have turmeric and ginger in them. So I use walnuts and cashews, turmeric, ginger, that I'm right now producing, and lemon zest and dates. And I roll them up. They're portable and bite size, and I make them in my home kitchen.
Great, thank you so much,
I leave
Debbie.
them out.
All right, Erica, would you mind going next?
Sure. Hi, my name's Erica MacArthur. I'm actually here in Gainesville, Florida. I make, they're called Pizzelle Waffle Cookies. They're Italian cookies. You make them using a waffle press. And currently I kind of am following the Cottage Food, laws for the state of Florida. I make them in my home, and it's a family recipe, and people seem to enjoy them. And that's about it.
Great, thank you so much, Erica. Jocelyn, you are next.
I'm Jocelyn Lanier. My product is beef jerky, Korean barbecue flavor for this program. My friends and family eat it, but I don't produce it to sell to anybody, and it's made in my home kitchen, presently, using small scale food dehydrator.
Great, thank you, Jocelyn. Sarita, you are next.
Hi, I'm Sarita Lachey. We are making fruit flavored herbal tonics. We are a licensed eatery in the Tallahassee area, so we produce our product in a commercial kitchen.
Great. Tori and Lisa.
We're working on a hot and not so hot sauce that is probably refrigerated and would ultimately need to be produced in a commercial kitchen, according to my understanding. We haven't sold it yet, so we are only working on it, the test recipes in our home kitchen, and we've sold produce and eggs and cottage food things on and off in the past, but this would be our first foray into something that would need that kind of investment in access a commercial kitchen and licensing, that sort of thing.
Wonderful, thank you, Tori. And I actually loved hearing your rooster in the background. That was great. Seta, you are next.
Hi, Seta Barnhart here in Monticello, Florida. I am working on the recipe for a tonic that is ginger, turmeric, coconut water, elderberry, and honey based. Doing some testing now, have a couple test drinks out now. The first is a tonic, though that's specifically for this class. We're going for the 2-ounce bottles of that tonic. Have a recipe down to some science. Right now we're doing it in our kitchen, but we do have a relationship with one of our farmers markets here, Frenchtown Farmers Market, that has a commercial kitchen that we plan to do the production through when we get to that point. Right now we're still just testing products and trying to get that recipe down, taste wise, quantity wise, to make sure it's a good thing.
Thank you so much, Seta. Pamela,
And
you
thank you guys
are
for being
next.
here. Appreciate to hear from you guys. A great thing to do.
Oh, Pamela, you're muted.
I knew I was muted. I just got out of the shower. It's spring on the farm here, people. I've got lambs coming out and all kinds of stuff going on today. Anyhow, my recipe is chicken soup. I am not currently producing it commercially. I just make it for friends and family. I do have access to a commercial kitchen. We had a full-scale restaurant prior to COVID, and we leased a space. And when all of that went south with COVID, we decided to build a commercial kitchen here on the farm. So we're in the process of doing that now, in finishing stages, and then we'll get that licensed and up and running, and then we'll see where this goes. I'm kind of befuddled about the whole idea of producing a homemade chicken soup that I make at home by the pot into, such a large scale operation, but I guess that's what we're here for, is to figure it all out. So that's it.
All right, thank you so much, Pamela. Yeah, and I am curious. I know there's something about meat percentages that I've heard other food experts speak about in the past. And I've been wondering about that for you. So maybe Keith and Matt can give us some feedback on that later today. Pat,
Right.
do you wanna go?
Hello, I make crispy egg white meringues, generally with cane sugar and different flavors. I have not sold any, so have not gone through any regulatory issues. I've got the questions about the cottage. I don't think I would qualify since I do have dogs here. And that I had the other question about I've got 2 kitchens, but one's on the 2nd floor, and who would regulate with that? Did I miss something? What else am I supposed to? Also,
I think that's good. We're just, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for being here too.
Yeah.
Ditto and Seta.
Cherokee, you are next.
Okay, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm kind of dealing with a fever and everything right now. Which is ironic because that is the type of product that I'd like to talk about, and that is a wheatgrass based tonic or some type of I think the base be that microgreen wheatgrass, but turmeric and ginger is what I have used in the past. But after doing my brainstorming and grocery store audits, speaking with some local people, I had some really great suggestions like elderberry and goji berry, maybe even powder to mix it in. Currently, when I make it, it's a refrigerated product. And some of the brainstorming ideas were even talking about putting it into powder form and then maybe like into gel cap. But then again, I didn't want to like totally divest even further from like this whole concept. I don't know where these boundaries are from like going into something like a supplement. And then I guess the other thing with that would be another person had stated that they didn't want to have like a gelatin based gel capsule if you did something like that, to stick with it being vegan and so forth. And then Seta also mentioned something about that elderberry. Well, it reminded me, she mentioned it as well. I know that there are certain strains that may contain maybe, I don't remember, but some harmful component. And I just was curious about how that was regulated as well.
Thank you so much, Cherokee. And Matt and Keith, just to let you know, JV, Wanda, Maria, and I are all project team members. So we are here as support, but yes, we are not going to be, we don't have any products to introduce to you guys. So with that, I am going to hand it over to you both. And I know that a lot of people submitted questions. And so however you guys want to tackle that and have impromptu questions as well, I will let you take it from here.
So Matt, you want to just go one question by question on the list?
Probably the easiest way for us to not get lost along the way. So let me pull it up real quick.
Okay, so the first one, we're talking about protein bites. That's the first question that we had. And I'll just read some of the background, if that's okay, of the question. Does everybody have a copy of the questions? No.
Well, they were posted on an online forum, and so if people went back and read, there were a couple people who had to send me their questions through email, and so there's some that haven't been seen by everyone on that forum as well. So I think it's best probably just to read them.
Sure. Okay. I won't, if they're long, I'll try to paraphrase them. And okay. The first one is need an answer by. Yeah, I guess I have one question. I still have a food safety about my product. Something I need to answer by making a dry version that does not need refrigeration. So I'm going to stop there. So products are made safe by a lot of different ways. And one of them is by controlling water activity. If you haven't heard that term, that's one you should become familiar with, because that's the amount of available moisture in a product that makes something like beef jerky safe while raw steak is sort of problematic. You do that by dehydration, and you measure that on a scale between 0 and 1. 1 being pretty much water, 0 means the complete lack of water, available water in that product. The drier something is, the less available water, sort of like us, we need water to live. Most bacterial pathogens stop growing about 0.92. And that's, think about moisture of a cake or something like that. There's enough moisture there. As you start drying things like, say, pasta, the dough itself has a fairly high water activity. When you dry the pasta out, the reason pasta lasts so long, even though it's the same exact ingredients, is in fact because the water activity is so low. So if you were going to use drying as a preservation method, that's a great one. And again, you would measure that using water activity. And again, water activity meters are sort of expensive. So you would just follow a recipe that you would test with a laboratory that says that if I cook this or heat it for 8 hours at this temperature, my final water activity is going to be whatever we said, say 0.8. And then you would know. because that's going to come into the second part of this question. What's the best way to test my product to know it's safe? This goes on for, this has been going on for like 60 or 70 years. You really can't test a product to be safe. You do that just to verify that something is working. But think about for those who have Thanksgiving turkeys, you don't test it before you eat it, right? You just go ahead and you trust the fact that after you're done cooking it, it's safe. Because we know that cooking it to an internal temperature of 165 will inactivate all those harmful microorganisms. So we develop a protocol, in this case, a cooking or heat temperature protocol, that if I do that every time, I know my product's going to be safe, and therefore I don't have to test it. Most food products don't rely on end product testing to show that they're safe. Now, in the beginning, while you're developing your product, that's a great idea that you might want to send some samples away to say that, well, I cooked this one for 6 hours, this one for 8 hours, this one for 10 hours, and this is what I ended up with. And it seems like the 8 hours is going to give me the best results. But after that, as long as you follow that same recipe, end product testing is really only to make sure that the thing is, your process is functioning properly, but you don't need to do it every time. So most food people are not actually doing end product testing. They've verified that whatever method they're going to use is going to be effective. And as long as they do that every time, just like you're cooking in your oven at home, you know your product is going to be safe. The same thing with pasteurization of milk, the cooking of anything in your oven. So you don't really have to test it. So for the drying question, yeah, if you have a particular pathogen with your protein bite, if you dry it to a certain level, that is, again, I'm going to pick 8.6 because there's one particular organism known as Staphylococcus aureus, the one that gives you staph poisoning, can grow at a fairly low moisture activity. So as long as I get it below that, most of my foodborne pathogens can be shelf stable. Now, it doesn't mean they won't go moldy. Molds can actually grow at much lower water activities, but the foodborne pathogens, the ones that are going to give you that foodborne illness, are going to not grow below really 8.6 to 8.9. Excuse me, 0.89. It's from 0 to 1. So if you have a product and you dry it out to a certain level, you can know that it can be shelf stable just because, again, that water activity is low. Here's the downside of that, though. One, because the question also that, do I just sit it out on the counter, wait for it to mold? That's a shelf life test. No. One, you would put it in the package that you're going to sell it at, because that's going to give you an idea of how it's going to behave in your package, because that package is going to be an oxygen barrier of some sort. So that will tell you, one, with the oxygen that you're providing it, and it won't rehydrate because it won't pull in moisture from the air if it's a good moisture barrier. And then you want to do it, what we do is a shelf life test, and you see how long it would last. And this is what you're proposing is just sitting on the counter is really a simpler method. And we'll let Matt chime in if he has another method. But if your shelf life is 2 or 3 years, you're going to be waiting a long time to figure out how long it's going to mold, right? If you want to say that I want to only have a 6-week shelf life on it, and you go out to 12 weeks and it never molds, you have it at a water activity that is probably going to be safe. Downside is the safer you make it, the less appealing it's going to be, because if you've ever eaten dry pasta, I used to do that as a kid, not so much anymore. It's not as good as the cooked stuff, right? That moisture makes it good. So yeah, it's one of those things where you run the balance of going too dry or too safe, and you never can be too safe, and still maintain the mouthfeel and something that's pleasurable. The way you do it in candy is you replace the water with sugar. The way we do it in certain preserved food is we replace the water with salt, which is sometimes the way you see salt preserved is. The salt is binding it up, or the sugar is binding it up, and that way we can maintain a lot of moisture in there, but the water isn't available for stuff to grow because it's busy playing with the sugar or the salt. That's why we have salted products.
Yes, that was the point I was just going to bring up, Keith. So I'm glad you did. You answered that perfectly. The only notes I had when I wrote on my sheet of paper said water activity. So you went above and beyond. But yes, what Keith exactly just said is you could actually have you could have a lot of moisture in your product, but you can have a low water activity. And I would have posed the question to Keith, how do I do that? And he would have come back to me and said, include sugar or salt or whatever. Now, sometimes that messes with your recipe and makes it not to what you want, especially if you're trying to make it healthy for people. That's a lot of the conflicting things I see. But technically, you can add salt, a lot of salt, and you have a lot of water in that product, but it's tied up and has a low water activity, therefore will not, pathogens can't grow, maybe limiting spoilage and things like that. And water activity can be an indicator of shelf life. That doesn't mean that if you get it to a certain water activity, we know exactly what your shelf life is, but there's some correlation there. And I added to my notes I think I have some documents that talk about shelf life and water activity somewhere on my computer. So I'll add that to the resource list that we send you guys afterwards.
Yeah, and as we go through some of these things, we just mentioned water activity, which is for this product very prevalent, but there's also components, things like pH, how acidic or basic that product is. What are the starting raw ingredients? So water activity is one of the simplest things, but you may be able to have more moisture, but if you acidify that product, we can make it safe using acid, which is why if anybody's done any home canning, acid has a preservative effect as well. So sometimes you can play with those different variables, and by upping the acidity and adding just maybe a slight bit more moisture, you may get a better mouthfeel and flavor profile to the product. But that takes a little bit more tweaking to do. Easy way to do is always err on the side of super safe, and water activity is one of the easy ones. But anyway, the next part, you thought more about oh, absolutely, please.
Can I jump in for just a second? So one of the things that I've heard from food experts in the past, and I just want to run by you guys to see what your thoughts are, is they've said that in terms of shelf life, really what you want to, even though a lot of things will safely keep for a while, what you want to mostly look at is what is the, like, when does it start to degrade or not be as tasty, like the best used by date, and to focus on that, not necessarily on the last possible date you could safely eat it, but when a consumer would get the most, enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, and the quality is great. As a microbiologist, I always tell my students, I don't really care if you don't like it, as long as it doesn't make you sick. But you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things where most of the sell-by dates on products are not for safety reasons, they're for quality reasons. And they're there. And why do they get you to throw it out when you know it's good? Because they don't want you to have a bad experience. They don't want the milk to be sour, even though that sour milk potentially is fine, or something is, maybe the meat color has changed, so the jerky has gotten gray a little bit because it's been exposed to oxygen. Doesn't mean it's safe, but those usual sell-by dates are really for a lot of those are based on quality. Matter of fact, if you produce your food correctly, you're not going to have a safety issue at all. And really what you're worrying about is going to be quality only. Honestly, if you make a food product that has the potential for growing a pathogen, we're doing it wrong. So really what we want to do is design the product such that even if you left it out for a year, it's not going to actually potentially grow microorganisms that can harm you. So yeah, quality, that's a great point. Quality is probably the determining factor. But my goal when I talk to people about food is I want to design it to be bulletproof. I don't want anything to get through. And basically by fiddling with those controls, we can design a food product. Again, acidification, water content, storage temperature, cooking temperature. If we do all those things correctly, we can pretty much, for the most part, guarantee it's safe. And again, I don't want to have a product that is going to go bad. We can't, obviously, like with an egg, I can't do anything about an egg. Chickens are pretty fussy about the way they make them. I can't get them to change that. But other things that you design, we can control. All right, I'm gonna go back to the bullet point number 2. Thought about more about how my product is being produced and how many times it changes from the mixer to the bowl and back to the mixer. I think from a safety standpoint, the best thing I do is prepare everything on a new stainless steel table with the bowls next to the mixing bowl. It should keep much more safe. Also need to work on my product because right now it needs to be kept cool because it lengthens the shelf life, I'm assuming. And it means that the technically wouldn't qualify for cottage food because it needs refrigeration. Yeah. If you need something time temperature for control, yeah, we have an issue, which means it's not naturally safe at room temperature. But as far as going back and forth, if any surface is clean, it isn't going to magically pick up microbes. So what is there is going to be there. Now, if I use a bowl and I make one batch and then I use that same bowl for the next batch and the same bowl for the next batch, it's going to get successively more organisms in it as the day goes on. But if I'm working with a bowl and I'm dealing with one batch going in and out, it's not going to pick up any more bacteria that were there when you started with. Now, they will proliferate over time at room temperature, so you want to work quickly as possible. But yeah, I mean, you can work on a new stainless steel table. You can go from your bowl to your mixer. That's fine. Really, my suggestion is anytime you make a new batch, you start with clean surface and clean utensils.
Oh, I do.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it, because what happens then if something were to go wrong, inevitably something does. So let's just say you're doing this 100 years, and on that 99th year, something went wrong. Then only that one day has to be recalled. You only have to worry about products affecting one day's, one production. If you don't clean stuff, and this is no one on this call, but if you take a week between or use the same bowls for a week without cleaning, now you have a week product worth to recall. Now, if you wash them at lunchtime, you do a batch in the morning, a batch at night, now you're only doing half a day. So the way food companies work is by lot size, and your lot size may be 1 day. And you just want to keep track of what that lot size is. And that's your exposure to foodborne illness, is that one lot. And again, if you clean up twice a day, you have half a lot or half a day's production. If you clean up beginning and end of the day, your lot size is that day. If you do it every hour, which again might be excessive, or maybe you have 10 bowls, you make one batch in each bowl, your lot size is 1/10 of that production. And as long as you can differentiate, that is the one that's at risk at that point. And that's whenever you hear a recall in the news, they always are giving you a lot number. And that way that company doesn't have to recall all their product. It's only maybe an hour's production or a day's production. And that way they don't get hit with tens of million, maybe they only have maybe $1 million worth of recall. But lot control is really kind of what you want to do. But keeping surfaces clean, great idea.
So is it each batch then that's a lot?
If you clean up in between, yeah, if you sanitize in between, that's your lot.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah, between cleanings typically is how we do lots. And
Between cleanings.
yeah, so in a tomato packing house, they will clean up beginning and end of the day. So a lot size is that day's production. In a chicken processing facility, they'll clean up 3 times. And their lots are basically 1/3 day's production. Each industry is slightly different.
Steve, quick question. So would you recommend for the different ingredients that you put into the lots, writing down their lot numbers in case there's like a cascade of recalling, or is that just administrative hell that's not necessary?
It's funny, the Peanut Corporation of America, the ones that had the peanut powder that was used in different products, yeah, that was one of the things. Well, I use peanut powder or peanut butter powder in products. Well, if your supplier has a recall, you now have to figure out what products that you have use their lot number. So yeah, it becomes one of those issues where if you do have something like that, it would be beneficial. I think, again, depending how big your operation is. If you're only producing, whatever, a couple of dozen cookies, muffins, or whatever a day, then maybe not. But if you start doing hundreds of these things, yeah, because at that point, if one of your suppliers has an issue, you need to know. At that point, you may have to recall all of your product. Your lot sizes go out the window because you now can't control what came in on the raw ingredients.
Are there any templates for helping people track lots and that sort of stuff, or should just people do an Excel spreadsheet? What do you recommend?
I'm sure there's some software out there, Matt. Do you know of any? I know Excel works because that's cheap, but
yeah, Matt, not off the top of my head, but yeah, I'm sure there's something out there. I would ask some of the businesses I know, maybe, and maybe they'll have a better answer than us.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a market for something, trust me, lot number tracking designed for small businesses. I just did a quick Google search. Inevitably, I'm sure there is one, and I'm looking at this one here, and they're probably very expensive. So as long as these are small sort of cottage type industries, I would say start small, and if the business sort of grows, maybe invest in that. I don't think you'd want to spend a whole lot of money at the beginning. But just kind of keep that in the back of your head, though. If something were to go wrong, how fast can you get your product off the shelf? Do you know where it's gone? If you're selling, backdoor sales, you may not know the individual who's buying with a cash purchase or at a farmer's market. Whereas if you're selling to Publix and Winn-Dixie, you would have to notify them that, hey, this product is possibly problematic. Please pull off anything that I gave you from December 1st through January 15th. So you want to just keep that recall plan in mind. And large industries have recall plans, and they do they do practice recalls to make sure that they're able to trace product. On a small scale, I don't think I'd worry about it too much. And I wouldn't buy any expensive software, but I think Excel might be a good starting point.
Yep, I would agree.
So Matt, I'll turn it over to you. Why don't you read the second question?
The next product, are we good on that one?
Yeah, do we know any more questions about the first one?
I think we covered everything from what I'm reading. And the last point of it would not qualify as cottage food because it needs refrigeration. That's usually a pretty good cutoff to decide if it's a cottage food or not, is if it needs refrigeration. So I would agree with that. If it was a dry product, you may be able to get by with it though. But there's a cottage food question later, so I'm going to save my talking for that. So the next product we have is the Pizzelle Cookies. I know she told us a little bit about them during intros. So let's see, the question kind of here is with the potential hazard of salmonella in the eggs, what is the proper way to handle eggs in this cooked baked product, and what precautions do I need to take while handling them? So Keith just had a pretty good discussion on cleaning and sanitizing. I will just make a short point of not handling and interacting with those eggs where it could potentially cross-contaminate the ready-to-eat product. Because after it's been, the hazard could exist in your product, but you are doing what to it? You are going to cook the product to the temperature, and so that hazard is going to be controlled. But are we handling eggs or anything else that has that hazard and it's touching a surface or touching a food product directly, that is the finished cookie product in this instance, because that's not going to go through a further step. So as long as you can keep that separate, along with all the cleaning and sanitizing that we'll continue to belabor probably through each of these questions, that's my short recommendation there. Keith, anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, again, just go through the salmonella part, because that's kind of the stuff that I do. Salmonella is found in eggs. It's a lot more rare than it used to be. So salmonella is probably the #1 cause of bacterial foodborne illness in the US, about 1.5 million cases a year. It's probably the most deadly. About 300 to 500 people will die from salmonella. The good news is that you're making a cooked product. So the equipment is almost self-sanitizing, right? It's actually self-sterilizing or disinfecting, because the heat's going to kill salmonella. Really anything around, and again, it starts at about 145 degrees, but really if you're at about 160 degrees, salmonella is not going to survive. The biggest thing, and Matt pointed it out, is the cross-contamination. So if you handle that product and you cook it, you're fine because it's cooked. But if your hands contain salmonella from cracking the eggs and you're touching the finished product, that's where you run into the problem, is recontaminated or cross-contaminated after the cooking process. So again, thinking about, again, if you were to handle raw eggs, let's say, and then you were to cook them or make cookies, and then you didn't wash your hands when you were packing them up, that would be the point at which you cross-contaminate. So yeah, it's that cross-contamination bit you really have to worry about, which means hand washing, lots and lots of hand washing. Soap and water, gel sanitizers are fine, but you want to get rid of, you really want to use soap and water to clean your hands.
Yep.
Okay, thank
And
you.
then, so then the second bullet here kind of talks about how do I properly clean and sanitize that iron. And so Keith already hit on a point that the iron is going to be hot. So that's kind of self-sanitizing there, but you don't necessarily want it to get all nasty and gunky on there.
Right, like before and after it cools down, And it's not like something you could submerge in water.
So really it's more of a cleaning thing. And I mean, I didn't think about this question beforehand. But
Wire brush.
Yeah, brush. I don't know if the manufacturer has any.
Or a scrunch,
recommendations.
a deep scrunchie. This to me reminds me of my waffle iron, right? Because it's really a pain in the beauty to clean it because there's a lot of different grooves and stuff. Something that's going to hold up to that won't be a regular sponge is going to get torn up with some of the patterns in there. But yeah, you want to clean it out because again, it will start to build up debris, which will be again really mess with the quality. But yeah, you're gonna have to. It's gonna be a slow process to clean it up each day. And again, if you use a wire brush, if that doesn't scratch it, a plastic scrunch scrubber, something like that, and so you don't have to immerse it. But yeah, you want to keep it clean more from a quality standpoint.
Sam's Club sells a grill cleaner too. Like the restaurant supply places sell a grill cleaner. You probably could get a small spray bottle of that and use that on it too, because it doesn't require rinsing.
Yeah.
You just basically would burn it off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It gets hot. It gets really hot.
Yeah, we use that in the restaurant a lot.
Okay.
I was wondering if he couldn't just pour water on there when it's still hot, so it'll bubble up and loosen everything.
I don't.
You sort of like deglazing it. You probably could. Again, one of the things with this type of a device is you got some of the patterns in there are going to be hard to get in there. And if you pour water, which will get it off fairly quickly, it's going to evaporate that water really quickly, and it's going to recrust down on there.
Yeah.
Again, you're going to have to get it wet a little bit, and again, just avoid the any of the heating elements. And that's a complicated shape. I don't think there's an easy way around that one, unfortunately.
So that's
Control
all I
storage, okay?
see for that question. Is there any other questions related to the Pizzelle?
We had a sort of question of eggs.
Yeah.
You want to keep them refrigerated. For the most part, eggs are sterile. They're nice little packages. But I think depending on who you read, it takes 1 out of every 20,000 eggs has salmonella, but you don't want to be that one person. Handling them, basically, if you handle them or you temper them, that's gonna be fine. Just don't, again, I know my parents and people I know used to leave them out all day. You know, they didn't refrigerate their eggs. I recommend that, but yeah, just wash your hands a bunch. Anytime you crack eggs, you can make your product in this. But before you handle any cooked item or finished product, and from the preparation, you have to wash your hands or have somebody else take care of that part.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll go to the next one. Matt, as we have beef jerky, potential hazard salmonella. If it starts out as a raw product, if the meat isn't brought up to the proper temp before drying, the pathogenic can actually survive and even become part of the killing the product. Yeah, that's true. Actually, for beef jerky, 2 things: salmonella, and the other one is pathogenic E. coli. That's another one. You might have heard of E. coli 0157H7. That's the one you hear in the news all the time. Yeah, if you sublethally heat something, sometimes it gets mad and it becomes a little bit more pesky to get rid of the next time. The bacteria really are good at adapting. So if you're going to kill it, make sure that you're using that time temperature regime that we talked about in the very first one. That we know is going to work. Don't do half a batch or do a rush batch. But yeah, if you dry it out, what's going to end up happening is it's not going to proliferate. So if you don't kill it all and you dessicate it, salmonella does a good job of surviving desiccation. But again, you're not going to have a whole lot in there. But again, I wouldn't worry. No, you worry about those few that survive. Just make sure that your time temperature that you're going to use for drying is sufficient to inactivate. And that will be the thing that you'd want to make sure. Prevent work surface and keeping hand clean. Yep, sanitizing. If you're going to use a sanitizer, make sure you're using food grade on any surface. Make sure that it's for washing food grade food contact surfaces. Hands, again, soap and water. If you're going to use a hand sanitizer, typically, I recommend that after soap and water. And the question I always get is, well, does a hand sanitizer work? And it does. Here's the difference. We have, let's see, 16 people on the call. I'm going to make Impossible Burgers, especially if we have any vegans here. I'll make Impossible Burgers for everybody, and I'm doing it on my grill outside, and a bird flies over and does what birds do on one of them. But you know what? I know that that bird poop may have salmonella in it. I'm going to cook it and make it safe. And then I'm going to do is I'm going to slap a piece of cheese on it, vegan cheese, and you won't even be able to taste the difference. But I only have 16 burgers, so we're going to have to play a little burger roulette. But it's 100% safe. Who wants to play with me? Anyone? But it's safe. No one. So what's happening here is it may be clean and it may be disinfected. It doesn't mean it's wholesome, right? So the same thing happens with gel sanitizer. You may kill a bacteria on your hands, but whatever filth is on your hand remains behind. So really, we're trying to get rid of that fecal contamination on our hands. We don't want to touch it, so that's why we're using soap and water. So the soap and water removes the filth and other things from your hand. It goes down the drain. And that way, not only is it clean, there's no microorganisms, it's also safe to use, right? And we're not actually going to put any quote unquote filth on the product. And that's why when we talk about gel sanitizers versus soap, we always prefer soap and water, because we want to wash all that filth off our hands, get it down the drain, and make sure that our hands are clean. I know that's a disgusting example, but the kids love that one in class. All right, what do we got? Keep raw products stored at the recommended temperatures. Absolutely. Again, you guys know about the danger zone, 140 degrees to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So you want to keep everything, again, below 40 degrees before you're actually going to process it. Now, you can temper food to make sure it comes to room temperature before you're going to process it. A lot of time when you cook food or preparing food, you will temper it to get it up to room temperature. There's a lag time. There's roughly a recommended no more than 2 hours. But for when you're tempering stuff, if you leave it out on the counter for say 30 minutes prior to or 20 minutes prior to cooking, the bacteria are not going to start reproducing right away. It takes them a little bit of time to get up to speed and start multiplying. So there's a brief period of time that you can take your stored product out, temp it to room temperature before you start processing it. But you want to keep that as short as possible, because the longer you have it out, the more possibility that those will multiply. The more they multiply, the longer you have to cook it. So you're always battling time. But yes, always keep things out of the danger zone. And again, that means 1, keeping it at 40 degrees. 2, if you're using a refrigerator, get yourself a refrigerator thermometer. Does everybody have a refrigerator thermometer? And if you don't, you need to get one, because how do you know your refrigerator is at 40 degrees? Nope, that doesn't work. So you have to be able to prove that it's 40 degrees. My colleague used to joke, as long as the mountains are blue in her beer, then she knows that it's cold enough. That's not a good thermometer. You should actually, if you're going to be making food, you should be able to guarantee that anything that you're using, whether it be your oven, that should also have a thermometer, as well as your refrigerator. And then what do we got here?
Yeah, so the rest of it, Keith's kind of asking about the regulation side.
Okay, go for
it. I'll take a stab at it, even though I'm not the USDA person. So yes, it's asking about kind of the complexity there, and you are correct. Anytime you have meat products, it brings in USDA as regulator. And if you are a USDA facility that's going to be inspected, that means someone from USDA office is going to come inspect your facility, and they'll ask you you'll even have to have like an office space for them in your facility. It's kind of an intense process and difficult to go through. Just from past experience, we had a client who, I think he was making beef jerky or something along these lines, and he was trying to use the shared facility over here. And so they had the USDA guy come over, and he ultimately didn't allow it, which I kind of agree with why he didn't allow it, because in a shared space, it has to be completely walled off with no other food business in there. But ultimately, they wouldn't sign off on it. And the standards that you have to meet for the USDA is just pretty intense. Let me read the actual specific question here. So USDA states they do not have refrigeration regulations. So, and this is Jocelyn, it looks like. So are you asking refrigeration of like meat before you do the processing or after?
This is a question that I have run into. We're raising our own cattle. So they will
Okay.
be getting slaughtered at the USDA plant
Okay.
as per requirements to have that. But if I'm storing my own raw product, when I asked them specifically on what I had to do for refrigeration, they said they didn't regulate refrigeration. Like literally, they just told me, I don't have an answer to your question. It will be in the plan you have to do, but I don't know what the plan is. Like they didn't answer that question. Like, how do people store this stuff when you kill a whole bunch of chickens or you kill a cow and you're looking to resell it? Where the heck are people keeping this stuff? And what plan pertains to that?
So this is you're not doing anything other than storing this meat?
This would be the raw product before the handling.
So
My
with my
inventory, essentially.
chickens, I have to keep a temperature log. So when my chickens get processed, because we process them here on the farm, when they get processed, they have to go into ice for a couple of days, and then they go right into the freezer. So we have to keep a log on how many times we've checked the temperature, and you have to have thermometers hanging in your refrigerator and your freezer and all that. But
Yeah.
I'm actually inspected by the Florida Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, yours is a bit different.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm trying to pull up, I try to cut and paste something, and obviously I didn't do that very well. There is a guide that FSIS, Food Safety and Inspection Service from USDA, has a guidance for producing meat and poultry jerkies for very small establishments. And if you give me just 1 second, I will send you the link to that page.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
Jocelyn, we also have 2 participants from last time that were doing, one was doing a jerky and I think one was doing a sausage product, and they both had gone through this process with the USDA. So I can reach out to them and try to see if they're willing to talk to you about what you're undertaking as well.
Yeah, I've reached out to some, I'm not getting any answers. Like, I know I can take it, like, I just don't know what to do with
So
it.
the attached document, that if you go to that page, there's you can download a PDF.
Yeah, I read this.
Have you? Okay.
It's a 54 glorious pages of
Yes.
how to cook jerky in a closed oven and moisture and with the door and Look, I'm gonna find the answer to my question one of these days, fellas.
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll find that I have a couple people in mind. I know a guy well, I don't know him that well, but I can get his contact, and I think he'd probably answer you if you emailed him with the USDA.
What I'm just trying to figure out is, like, is there a plan that needs, because I know, like, if you're gonna do certain things, like you have to have like your HACCP or your, all these things. Like, is there a plan for safe storage?
Yeah. So for any meat product, you're going to be regulated under HACCP, Hazard Analysis for Critical Control Point. So you're going to need to have a HACCP plan.
Okay.
Safe storage of meat, again, is part of the prerequisite programs
Okay.
of good manufacturing practices, and they're covered within the Code of Federal Regulations 21 CFR 117. So that's the Code of Federal Regulations, volume 21, and the new GMPs are under part 117. So you do 21 CFR 117, and you can look up the GMPs. And again, it's a bunch of legalese. It's a little frustrating because, again, government documents are insanely hard to read. One of the things you might want to do is occasionally there are meat HACCP courses that are available to take. I know the University of Florida Animal Science does run HACCP courses. Do you guys run any, Matt?
I was gonna say we can loop in Jason Scheffler.
Yeah, Jason would be the guy.
Jason does that, so he would be a great person to ask this question to as well. Something else that's coming into my mind, and I'm not sure where you're trying to go with this, but in previous talks with USDA and FDACS, I believe if you're only going to sell retail, so that means by retail we mean mainly direct to consumer.
Won't be retail exempt. I
It
already,
won't. You've already
No.
gone through that? Okay.
yeah,
Well, then I won't tell you the rest, but
yeah,
that could have been a loophole for you.
yes, yes.
And
My
there's
thought is, what if you get a hold of the processing plant that you're getting your beef butchered at and ask them if you could rent storage space? They're already USDA inspected, and then just pull from there when you're ready to process and turn it into jerky. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that you don't,
Yes.
so that you're not like storing all this meat on site.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
that-
figure I'd be able to store it on site, but I didn't know like what plan pertained to this whole operation, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know if it was something different than that HACCP thing or whatever.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
there's a couple regulations out there, and again, there's 9 CFR 417 is another rule that's that you can look up and kind of muddle through. The other part of your question here, though, you have, do people use co-packers? Absolutely, all the time. And what a co-packer is, it's an authorized facility that just charges you X amount of dollars to make your product for you. And they do all the paperwork, all the government paperwork for you. So if it's cost effective, yeah, people use co-packers all the time. The person who mentioned bottled sauces, hot sauces. I have a friend who makes a product, and again, he does all of his work through a co-packer. He just designed it and he sent it to a bottling facility. And again, they eat some of your profit because they're the middleman. But if you're having or you're struggling with the regulations, then trust me, they can be confusing and laborious. Going with a co-packer may be great because again, you can work with them for a while. You can learn from them. You can ask questions, and then by the time maybe your first year or 6 months is up, you'll know enough, or you'll be confident enough to go in and try it on your own. But there's got to be a lot of paperwork. Anytime you make food, and you're not going to be exempt, yeah, there is a little bit of a learning curve.
Yeah.
And you can tell because Matt and I just don't know. I mean, it's like one of the.
We don't know. We can maybe divert this question to maybe we can divert to Taylor, who is our counterpart, who used to work for Jason, and start with her and go up to Jason Scheffler level, and they deal with, or Jason at least deals with HACCP, with meat HACCP. Keith and I deal more with packing house HACCP and fruit and vegetables. So we're just not as up to speed on the meat stuff, but we can certainly pass it on to Jason or give you his contact. And
Yeah, I'd love to blow up his email. I won't be shy.
He knows us, so he would be okay with it. You can blame us. So I think that's all the questions I see for the beef jerky, unless you have any others, Jocelyn. We can definitely be in touch with his contact.
I guess it's sounding like it is possible to do this small batch. Like if I didn't cross state lines with it, then I could be retail exempt, as I'm understanding. But this could be produced small batch somewhere, or would I have to have my own kitchen to do that?
Well, if someone else is doing it for you, they would be their responsibility.
No, what I mean is like, is it possible for myself?
This is not a cottage food, so you would have to do it in a commercial facility.
Yeah,
it would have to be in a facility that meets the
that standard. Gotcha. And that may be
they're the ones who are doing the retail exemption, and they'll still probably make you do a HACCP plan, and I think maybe work with the process authority or something. I've seen this somewhere. I haven't seen it in a while, and you can only sell up to like 65,000, my guess, somewhere in there annually gross. So if you're going to go above that, then I don't think you can do that. But I don't want to spread false information. I'd verify that with FDAX. But yeah, we can look into that. Jason probably knows, or the USDA guy that I know. I can reach out to him as well.
So I do just want to do a quick time check and let you guys know that we have 30 minutes left. I will just do the preview for the next module and the email on Monday so that you guys get extra time for answers to these questions. So go ahead. I just wanted to do that quick time check.
All right, Mel, I'll send the chicken soup over to you.
Yeah, let's keep going. So chicken soup talks about this is Pamela. They have owned restaurants in the past. It really just talks about sanitizers.
Oh.
So I might actually throw this one back to Keith because he loves talking about sanitizers. I don't really
Yeah.
see any questions, but let's see. It's talking about the topic of mixing up sanitizers and the kind of the ratios there, and more not always being better, which I would agree with. And so, yeah, Keith teaches courses on sanitizers, so I'm going to throw it back to him, but definitely follow your labels and any instructions that do it safely. That's more of a, could be a worker's safety, or it be putting on it a concentration that's way too high to make the food unsafe at that point.
Yeah, so Matt's right. There's a couple of things to consider with sanitizers. One, it has to be food grade. That's the number one thing. So you'll probably have bleach at your house. The chemical name for that is sodium hypochlorite. But just because they both say Clorox, sodium hypochlorite, or bleach, doesn't mean they're both acceptable for use. You have to use one that is food grade. Typically, food grade is made to a higher standard. Your household bleach may have rain fragrance. No one wants to eat rain fragrance. I don't think anybody knows where rain fragrance comes from. So yes, you have to use food grade chemistry. So we do see this a lot. We go out, we see a bottle of great value bleach sitting in a food production facility, and you go, that can't be done. So one, always use food grade chemicals. You're absolutely right though. More isn't always better. And the one that really is the case, there's really two reasons why. One, if you put too much on there, you're gonna have chemical residues that could make you sick, and that would be against EPA's regulations. But something like sodium hypochlorite or bleach, as you add more, it becomes more basic or alkaline, and the chemistry becomes less effective. So what ends up happening is if you keep adding more bleach, it actually you're using a lot of chemistry to have very little effect. It still will work, but again, you think about you're cleaning a pool with about 3 to 4 part per million sodium hypochlorite or calcium hypochlorite chlorine tablets, and you're mixing up sanitizers at home, which are 200, 300, 400. And a lot of times you're doing that because, again, it's hard to precisely mix those. The other thing, the dangerous thing is the way to make chlorine more effective or sodium hypochlorite better is to acidify it. If you add an acid, it's no longer basic, and then the chlorine becomes more efficacious or stronger. The problem is you can over acidify, and then you start producing chlorine gas, and that's the bad thing. That can kill you. That happened during the pandemic. Somebody said use vinegar, somebody said use chlorine. So the person who read that said, I'll just use both and make it better. And she almost killed herself because, again, she started producing chlorine gas from her kitchen. And luckily, when she fell down to an area where she actually had good air and didn't die. But that's one of the reasons you never mix sanitizers, because they sometimes don't react well, and sometimes they'll produce things like chlorine gas. If you're worried about that, there are certain other sanitizers that are safer than others. There are acid-based sanitizers like peroxyacetic acid, hydrogen peroxide, and they come under different brand names, Sanidate, Tsunami. There's a whole bunch of them out there. But again, you can use a good chlorine-based sanitizer, and that's fine. Some of them are for food contact surfaces. Some of them are not. So like quaternary ammonia or Lysol is really good for cleaning the environment, but not food contact surfaces. So you might use it on around sinks and for your cabinet tops, but for your cutting boards, you don't want to use it because it's not meant for cutting boards. Some of them, like sodium hypochlorite, bleach, you can sanitize surfaces, but then they require a water rinse after you use them. And Matt hit on it immediately. What you do is you follow the label instructions to the letter. It'll tell you how much to use, how much to mix it up. But what you're looking for is an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency registration number. And if you look at even your laundry bleach is going to have an EPA registration number on it. It will say for the intended use. Your one at home probably says laundry, but the one you want to use in your processing says for food production or sanitizing food contact areas. And then we'll give you a use solution, how much to use, 1 ounce per gallon, half an ounce per gallon, and use it at the strength that they recommend for the contact time. They'll even give you a contact time, maybe 45 seconds. And if you follow those instructions, those have been verified or validated to work and to sanitize whatever surface you happen to be using. So yeah, sanitizers, there's a whole bunch to choose from. Just make sure that it's food grade and you use it according to the label instructions, and that way it's going to be safe. And never mix them. Don't think adding two together is going to be better than one by itself, because again, that can be dangerous in the case of using something like vinegar and a bleach solution. That could get really ugly really quick. Both serve safe is awesome. If you've taken the serve safe test, awesome. That's a training for restaurant folks. And again, if you've gone through serve safe, you've heard a lot of these principles before. Is there anything else we missed on that one?
I think you're reading my homework questions instead of my questions for you all, which is probably my fault because of the way that I put them on the chat.
Okay.
But one of my, I think one of my biggest questions was how has COVID-19 impacted the way we ensure food safety today? Are there any changes in disinfection protocol or anything like that?
I don't see that one on what I have, but just for COVID is really for person to person. We don't see a whole lot of food transfer of COVID, SARS-CoV-2, the virus itself. So really what we're worried about is person to person, worker to worker, worker to customer. Again, the early on in the pandemic, people were worried about cleaning the cups or the cans. Honestly, that was probably more just people panicking. But we haven't seen a whole lot of container to person transfer. And if it is minimal compared to what's going on from person to person. So the way this is spread is typically from one person being next to another, coughing, sneezing. But yeah, again, you don't want people sneezing on your food for various reasons. But again, food transfer, COVID being foodborne, I haven't seen any evidence of that at all in the literature. And it's really just keeping your workers and your clients safe. Just from, again, especially in a restaurant type area.
Yep, I would agree. Yeah, sometimes you may see stories of food, but if you actually read the articles or science behind it, it's not valid. So Keith and I love to remind people that it's not a foodborne transmitted thing.
I think I was thinking of like contaminated surfaces, but so basically there's all the disinfectants that we're currently using in food service, if we're using tsunami hydrogen peroxide as a method, that's still going to take care of any residual COVID. If someone did sneeze or whatever, or touched, and I'm talking about, in the kitchen.
Yeah. Tsunami is a good product. I don't know if it's been verified for COVID. I haven't seen any studies. It probably has. I know Lysol has been shown to inactivate COVID type viruses. But yeah, it's one of those things where we do a lot of sanitation that's probably unnecessary, but we're being super cautious. But yeah, just wiping stuff down with something like a tsunami should be effective in keeping those down. Really though, it's the air exchange. You want to just, again, make sure that you have good, proper air exchange in that room.
Well, and I'm a firm believer in bleach. That's my favorite sanitizer, but there's certain chemicals that can be used in organic or kosher processing that can't be used in others. I learned a lot when I was doing the sanitizing section, this module, about how different sanitizers are allowed in different ethnic or different cultural practices versus others. And I'm not an organic farm. I'm not certified organics, but I like to follow those practices as much as possible. So
yeah, again, tsunami, which is a peroxyacetic acid, for those who don't know, and it's actually peroxyacetic acid and hydrogen peroxide mixed together, and it even has a food grade surfactant in it. Is a really good disinfectant. It's probably the second most common one, but it is more expensive. Bleach works fine. So if you don't have to worry about being organic or kosher or whatever, That one's super effective. You have to worry about it rusting equipment because it's chlorine bleach. It will rust things if you're not careful. and use too much. But yeah, no, proxycetic acid, PAA, tsunami, that stuff is fine. That works great.
Thank you.
Yep. And Keith, I might have spaced it out reading questions. Did you mention the N list for COVID? No.
Yep.
Okay, so if you were, there's a list from the EPA called the N list. We can add to the resources that that basically list all the sanitizers that have been, I guess, validated as effective against COVID. So you could use that for your high touch areas if you wanted to use something that's been proven effective against COVID. So just letting you know that's out there. But let's keep moving so we can get through all of them. So we are, and Keith actually just posted that in the chat if you want to go look at it. We are to the meringues now, correct?
Yep.
So this is Patricia. So kind of skim through it here. So basically, I believe you are asking, mention allergens.
Questions were at the end.
Yep. Just trying to find what I'm looking for. So you are now asking, unsure which agency would regulate your food business, whether it's DBPR or FDAX. And then you're also asking, and I heard, yeah, you mentioned this in the intro, so you're asking about the cottage food. So to my knowledge, having pets is not it's not against the cottage food rule. I think if it was, it would probably shut down most cottage food businesses. Yep. Because everyone has a pet. Now, I often help teach, I'll show up to support the food safety section of cottage food classes with some of the county agents. And so we show pictures of like people with their dog in the sink or on the countertop, or their, whatever, cat drinking water out of the sink's faucet. Now, I would highly recommend that you don't have that. So if you can make sure that your dogs are kept separate, however you can do that, it's going to be probably impossible to keep them from running through the kitchen. But to my knowledge, that is not against anything with cottage food, if that's the route you do want to take. Now, if it's going to go through inspected, which again, that would mean you're working out of a commercial kitchen, so that wouldn't be your home kitchen anyways. Probably usually it depends on how you're going to sell it. My best guess is that it would be FDAX, but if you want to come off and talk, are you trying to sell this just direct to consumer, like at a market, or packaged in some way from more of a grocery store setup?
This program is what I'm going through in order to see what I can do, essentially. Okay. Because right now my packaging is just delivering to coworkers and friends and family.
So just to give you, and it's not always this crystal clear, but in general, if you were more catering, selling direct at a market for short shelf life, that can usually fall under DBPR with a serve safe license. If you're packaging it and it is more for wholesale, or someone else is selling it for you, then that's going to fall under FDAX. And, I can always follow up with you later if you need more specifics on that. Now, you're also asking about cottage food. So pets is not a problem, although we control that. But
they don't help me make them. So
I'm going through your bullets here. So are you asking as well if that could be a cottage food, the food product itself?
I thought it could be.
Yeah. So my question.
Somewhere I read that pets weren't allowed, because I didn't know anything about this, but I can't find the resource at the moment, but I'll have to find it. I should have copied it.
The question I'll ask goes back to the first product we talked about. Does it need to be refrigerated?
Does my product need refrigeration? No.
Okay. So
it would qualify as a cottage food based on cookies, pastries, non-refrigeration.
I would agree. So that's a great point. Anything like what you making, I just texted the county agent who teaches cottage food, and I said, would this, and she says she thinks it would be. And she thinks the FX guy would agree. Now, anytime you do a cookie, pastry, anything like that, if you, for example, put like cream cheese or anything of that nature that needs refrigeration, that would automatically make it not a cottage food. Just want to make that clear.
Right, this is basic, this is essentially egg whites and sugar with
It's
flavoring.
cooked, it's baked, and then that is the final product. Nothing else goes on it. Okay. So probably your most simple route would be to go through cottage food. If that is feasible for you. You're asking about the second kitchen. I think that was more related to the dog question.
Right.
The only language and the cottage food law is fairly vague, but the only language that is specific about that is that it just needs to be your primary kitchen. So you can't like have a shed in your backyard that has a kitchen in it. That would not be allowed. Now, if you have two kitchens in your house, I guess that's two main kitchens. I'm not sure how they would interpret that.
We got two kitchens we use in our house.
Yeah, so I mean, I see that as that's both your primary kitchen. If and you also asked about inspection, there is no inspection if you're able to go through the cottage food.
Okay.
Ultimately, the only thing that could happen is if there was an issue or I believe a complaint. So as long as no one complained about you to FDAX, then no one would ever come. FDAX does have the authority if they receive a complaint to come and then inspect your kitchen and impose fines and things like that. Sure it happens. I haven't heard of it happening to anyone I know. But yes, I mean, we don't have a ton of time left, so I won't belabor it again, but all the cleaning and sanitation things that Keith has talked about, like you want to make sure you're still following that as best you can in your home kitchen, because that's definitely a concern I have when I hear people doing cottage food is, yes, you're not inspected, but please still take it seriously and control any of the hazards there, including hand washing and everything else. You have quite a few bullets. Is there any specific question in that I missed?
I think you caught the questions.
Okay. And Keith, any thoughts?
Well, again, the beginning of the meringue, you're talking about salmonella. Again, as long as if you're monitoring your temperature, any salmonella that comes in the eggs should be killed. So again, you're cooking them, I think, to a fairly high temperature. Again, I looked up a couple of recipes. The question about pets, I went to the Florida guidance. There is no guidance on pets. Some states prohibit pets from being in the kitchen. Some states prohibit pets from being in the home, which means they have to be in the backyard, but not in the house. There's nothing in the Florida guidance, though, for pets. So we're not one of those states.
Yes. The Florida law, if you read it, is pretty lax compared to other states. So I feel confident that it's not written in there because I've never seen it or heard anything about that.
Honestly, if it was me, I'd keep all pets out of the kitchen. I know that's hard. From a microbiology standpoint, I would try to do that. My cat's, I'm surprised she hasn't jumped on me yet, is always jumping on surfaces. And yeah, I would just be wary about that.
Okay.
We
Yeah,
have a
you're-
gate up
Yep.
between our hallway and our kitchen to keep the dog out. And even with that, there is still dog hair that I have to sweep out of the kitchen. I can't imagine if the dog was allowed in there.
My dog's hairless. I do have one that has a little hair, but I've got hairless terriers, so. But they are not interested unless I'm cooking meat, so.
Yeah. Again, just the cleaner you can keep something, the less likely something is going to go wrong.
Right. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm a micro major from UF, so.
I saw that. Solidarity. There you go. Let's see. The next one is tonics. Again, you've identified E. coli, control, serve safe. Say because I've said that in the commercial kitchen who uses animal byproducts, we've had difficult time convincing the pertinence of proper storage, sanitation, and infection. Is it a hard time, Chris?
The question, I think, is the last bullet.
Last bullet? Okay, so when
pre-prepping.
pre-prepping ingredients for future juicing, how much time ahead may I juice and freeze fresh fruits, juice, and veggies? If that's a safe idea. And so how much estimated time will it take, will the frozen ingredients keep? If you freeze stuff, again, it's really just the quality issue there. Nothing's going to grow when things are frozen. The bigger issue is when you juice something and you freeze it. How fast it freezes is sort of the important thing. And again, most juices, because of the acid content, are usually safe. But if you were to make, again, something out of vegetables, and we had an outbreak of Clostridium botulinum in carrot juice, because that's not as acidic as, say, an orange juice. You have to really worry about things getting to a cool temperature fast enough. So if you were chilling a small glass, it's going to freeze in a short amount of time. And again, that won't have time for the bacteria to proliferate. If you put a large pot or, several gallons, it could take several hours. And in that several hours, things can grow. So freezing is fine. How long is really it just depends on what juice and what the product is and how fast you get it down to, how fast you freeze it. If it's in an airtight container, oxygen will cause it to oxidize. So it's one of those things where you can do all that. But I don't know if there's any one time I can give you on that one. I'm sorry. You can keep things frozen for months, even years, and they stay fine. Certain berries stay frozen for years, and they'll be okay. What will happen over time if you're freezing whole berries or any fruit or vegetable? They will lose moisture. If you ever take stuff out of the freezer, you see those ice crystals. That's called sublimation. And again, you will lose a lot of the water content just through the ice turning into a vapor directly without going through a water phase. So the longer you keep it, the more potential you have for sublimation. And again, you just lose water content and quality goes down. But nothing's going to grow in the freezer as long as you freeze quickly. Did that answer? I know that's kind of vague, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Keith. I don't really have much else there. Just saw something in the chat. Pamela posted about inspected. Was that about the cottage food question, Pamela? And you're muted. Sorry, I can't hear you.
coconut water.
And you're still muted.
Emily, you're muted.
Yep, I'm sorry. I got it. Got too many things going on here, too many windows. When you do cottage food, like I'm assuming that all of us are planning on selling wholesale. If you don't sell directly to the public, then you don't fall under that cottage food law, and you have to go into a licensed.
Yeah, that's a great point that I failed to mention. So she says wholesale, yes, anytime you do wholesale, that immediately shunts it to a commercial kitchen. You do mention the internet. Now that has changed. So
Yeah, I think that did change.
I agree with, not that I think it's a good idea from a food perspective, but they did just change the law kind of as a result of COVID. So you can technically sell your product on the internet. It used to be that you could sell it on the internet, but you had to deliver it in person. Now you can send it anywhere. And I asked that question to FTAC and they said, yeah. And I said, that's crazy, but that is what it is. But no, that's a good distinction. I just wanted to point it out when I saw your chat.
I just want to add, I just learned something too about that. You can't ship the fruit out of the citrus fruit out of the state of Florida, but you can ship the juice.
And can you repeat that, Matt? I'm sorry, that was really good. Like that, that makes you able to sell it in what capacity? Like what was the distinguisher there?
Cannot send the actual citrus fruit like oranges, grapefruits, or tangerines, but you can juice it, put it in a bottle, and you can ship it.
Thank you. But I guess I didn't qualify that properly. What is the purpose? What were you saying right before that? Like why, what was the going online? It was in reference to the cottage versus licensing.
Cottage food, you as of like can't speak today, July 1st of last year, a new law or an update to that law came about, and it actually raised the limit. I didn't mention that, but you have a very high limit now of sales, and you can sell online. So you can ship as long as it's a cottage food product. So you're making it in your kitchen and meets those the standards and the labeling and everything else that goes with cottage food, and then you can ship it. That's all.
And I don't know if juice falls under that. I think juice falls under
Yeah,
juice HACCP.
juice, that would be a completely different regulation. That would be
Juice HACCP, right?
the oranges would fall under produce safety rule. The juice would fall under juice HACCP.
Yeah, you can't sell juice under a cottage food rule.
Yeah,
that's a separate rule, and that's called juice HACCP. So just like meat HACCP, there's a special course that you go through for juice HACCP.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so we have 5 or so minutes left. I know we got one more question in the email, so I want to address that because I have some thoughts on it, and it's about, and I can't get it to pop up. It's about hot sauce, right? And Keith, I think you got that too. So I just pulled it up, and so it's asking about hot pepper sauce, which agency does it fall under? And if it's a refrigerated, does it require certification? Those are all very, very good questions. So let me ask you, this is Tori, right? Tori and Link. So this is just a hot sauce that goes in like a glass bottle to be sealed. Am I right in assuming that?
We're working on the recipe, and the most recent round of the recipe has been less liquidy, and it's not a vinegar base. So it's tomatoes, peppers, canistel, herbs, turmeric, ginger, a little olive oil at this stage. And it definitely, I mean, there's no question it's a product that would need refrigeration, that we know for sure. But it's a little almost spreadable. So it's like a thicker consistency than like the typical hot sauce in the bottle that's watery.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, just to generally answer your question about the regulator, I feel 100% confident that it would ultimately be FDAX enforcing an FDA regulation on you, but you are not getting an inspector from Washington, D.C. It's going to be someone from FDAX. So ultimately it will be through them. Now, where that regulation actually falls, that's a little bit more complicated. So just to paint the picture, when we deal with like salsas, hot sauce, now I'm not totally sure with yours, I have to review the ingredients, but something like a hot sauce or salsa with tomato base, those tomatoes have a higher pH, and there's what's called the acidified food regulation. And it has a pretty strict cutoff, not pretty strict, it is a strict cutoff of 4.6, where the tomatoes are usually around that 4.6, maybe a little above, maybe a little below, but either way, they're going to say you need to acidify that product, adding, people I work with that have salsa, they add lime juice or vinegar.
Yeah, that's in ours too, lime juice.
So that would be how you do it. And then associated with that is you have to take a very long, intense class called Better Process Control School. You have to work with a lab called a process authority who will validate your product and say, with this ingredients at this measurements, you and this processing, you will be at the right pH and control measures, and they'll sign a letter and you'll submit it and register as a canning facility. And I have a guidance document that I'll send in that spells all of that out.
Awesome, thank you.
We don't need to get into that, but then you bring up refrigeration. So say you have a product with that, if you do it at a short shelf life as a refrigerated product, technically that will shunt it out of the acidified food regulation and over to just the GMPs, or if you were larger, preventive controls rule. And so again, both pathways would be through FDAX. That's who your inspector would be. But if you refrigerate it, I have a good feeling that you might simplify it from having to go through all the acidified foods regulation.
Right.
Now you're still going to have a lot of GMPs and other things to follow. Ultimately, whatever your inspector is asking of you.
Right.
But yes, if it's an acidified food, pretty complicated. Other route might simplify a little bit, but it's through FDAX for sure. And I'll send you some links that can hopefully help you out there.
Great, thank you.
any other questions related to that? And I think we're almost out of time. Or any other general questions?
Yeah, shoot,
While we're
just
still
fire
here.
away. Yeah, pop them in the chat. Or just unmute yourself and just fire away.
I do want to also just remind everyone that we have some upcoming modules that will help solidify some of this stuff or expand upon it. One is the packaging and shelf life module, which will be soon. And your packaging obviously ties quite a bit into your food safety and that. And then we also have a lab testing module later on where you will see videos of those different lab tests in action, and so you can better understand them. So, but if anyone has any questions for Keith and Matt, now is the time. Otherwise, we're gonna wrap up and thank them very much. Anybody?
I have a question, please. Firstly, thank you so much for joining us today. You know, this whole juice journey for us has been just so daunting, and at many times it makes us want to give up because there's so many regulations, rules, tests, HACCPs, trainings, everything, and a lot of money and time and energy has to be invested into creating a simple juice product. How many people in the previous programs have successfully launched a juice product that you may know of?
Thank you, Sarita, because I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed too after hearing all this. So
It's a lot. Juice is a lot.
So I can't speak to this program. We do juice HACCP and work with juice processors around the state and around the country. Yeah, there's a lot of regs, and there's reasons for every reg. For every regulation, there's a dead body, and I don't mean to be cruel, but that's exactly why they're there. So yeah, they take it really seriously, and it's one of those things where, again, it seems daunting, but again, you name a product, and I'll tell you about an outbreak that was really devastating. So that's why the regulations are there. They're not just there to make a hurdle. And the more you know, the easier it becomes. But yeah, it's one of those things where there are a lot of difficulties. But again, there's a lot of success stories. One of the things, Arizona Iced Tea. Those guys were advertising guys. They didn't make a single thing. They did everything with a co-packer, and they just branded it. And Arizona Iced Tea is worth probably $1 billion today. We know folks who do high pressure boutique juices. In the couple of high pressure processor guys the Fresher by Pressure folks. And again, they co-pack with those folks, and they do a really great job, and they get a premium for their product. So I've seen those do well. The people who want to do fresh juices, they have even more hurdles to jump through. So yeah, I know of a bunch who have opened up boutique places. I've known people I know some of the big processors here in the state, the citrus guys who have gone, belly up. I mean, so whether you're a Tropicana or you're a boutique juice type operation, I have seen successes and I've seen failures. But again, just because of what's happened, the reason those hurdles are there are there for a reason. And again, I know it seems like a bunch, but like I said, you don't want to be part of a tragedy. Again, it's just one of those things where it has happened enough times. When the juice HACCP regulation came in I think it was the late 90s. It was due to an outbreak right here in Florida, and FDA felt they had to step in. And people who were selling fresh orange juice, they didn't use proper pH, which is one of those control measures I talked about. They served it to individuals who were immunocompromised, which are one of the at-risk groups, which you may have learned about. I think they were kidney transplant, organ transport people. They were having a get-together at a certain theme park here in Florida, and the juice was unpasteurized. And they killed a lot of people, and that's why these regulations are in place. So yeah, I know it's kind of crazy. People have done it though, and it does take a little bit of time. And if you're having trouble kind of getting all those hurdles, think about a co-packer. I think Matt talked about this earlier. they'll do all that paperwork for you. You may not make a whole lot of money in the beginning because you're giving some of your profits to them, but at least you'll be producing a safe process. You'll have all the paperwork in order. And then if it's a viable product, you can then invest the time and money into doing it yourself. But that co-packer route in the beginning might be the way to go. See if people are interested in your product to begin with. And if they are, then you can invest the time and money to start up your own operation. But if you want to get over that first hurdle, I always suggest going with a co-packer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the least expensive co-packer relationship that we found thus far is $20,000 plus.
Yeah, you definitely have to look around.
Yeah.
It's up to you which way you want to go with that. But I mean, definitely if you want to do it yourself and you're determined, like you'll figure it out. I mean, I don't have good examples from juice people, but I've had several acidified foods, salsas, hot sauce people who had to go through that strict regulation. One, I met her in 2018, and we kind of had to figure out how to make our place a canning facility, how to get through all those things. And now she's I think hitting 7 figures and is in she's in JW Marriott and a lot of local chains down here and Whole Foods, I think, at this point. And so it's a testament to her hard work, but definitely if you weed your way through it, it gets easier once you figure it out. I mean, there's a reason when we talk about the acidified foods, off the top of my head, I can name the 8 steps that she has to do because we've been through it. So now we know, and it can definitely be done.
So again, success stories. Again, I don't want to send you to a particular online shopping establishment, but this link will take you to one. It just happens to be a gentleman I know who produces his own hot sauce, and he does it through a co-packer, and he sells it off of Amazon. Again, this is just a side business for him, but it's just one individual I know who's a success story. Again, he still has his day job, but he started out small with a co-packer, and this is the product. It's an actual product.
I have one question. I don't know if either of y'all or anybody could answer this, kind of to piggyback off of that. I had during the grocery store audit, I spoke with a small grocer locally, and they used to make wheatgrass shots in-house in their grocery store. And I think Whole Foods does this also. Is there any kind of, like, if rather than putting like a 20,000 or plus investment, if you decide to go that route or invest the research, is there anything like if you're making the product on spot, like with a food truck or at a market, or does it all still fall under all of those regulations? Like if you have the ingredients there and you make it on like a single serve kind of basis?
That would most likely shunt it because you're coming more into a catering license then at that point, which falls under DBPR. So it does simplify it because you would just need your serve safe certificate and to follow whatever their inspector is telling you to do. So yes, that if you are serving it fresh, that could simplify it a lot for you.
Yeah, as soon as you put it in a bottle, you put a cap on it, you now have to do something to it. And that puts you into a whole different regulation. You'll notice if you ever go to Sam's Club on the weekends, they're selling that fresh freeze orange juice. They have to produce it and they have to put a warning label on there. So this was not produced under HACCP. There's potential health risk associated with it. And they're producing it, I think under GDPR, right? But yeah, juicing it and serving it is basically like a restaurant. You fall under those types of regulations. As soon as you put it in a bottle, you're making a food product, and that goes to a totally different agency. So yeah, it's the same product, but yeah, as soon as you put that cap on, it's a completely different product.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Keith and Matt, I feel like we could pick your brains for days and have useful information. I'm so grateful that you were here with us today and for all your answers and considerations and thoughts. So thank you again for joining us. I am going to do a quick little preview for people who want to stick around. I know we're over on the time. So if you need to go, it will be in the recording, and I completely understand if you drop off, but I did just want to quickly preview the next module for everybody. So, and Matt and Keith, I totally understand if you don't want to stick around for that.
Yeah, I may jump off, but just feel free to pass on our emails. I'm looping Keith into that, but you can just share mine if he doesn't want to. But definitely, and I'll follow up with, I listed out several resources here, and I'll send you guys an email in the next couple of days that you can pass on to the rest of the group. So and there's a
Awesome.
lot of
Thank
fun
you so
talking
much.
to you. I love talking to you guys because it gives us different questions and then gets our minds thinking. And ultimately, then if you're successful, I would like you to tell me so then we can know how to do something in the future.
Thank you.
And
Bye,
Keith,
everyone. Thank you.
I'll post my info too before I jump off.
Thank you
but
so
thanks,
much.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck with all your projects.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you so much for your time.
All right, so this next time we have the Knowing Your Cost module, where you will dive into really understanding the cost of producing this specific product. There is a balancing act in all this. You could get everything down to the cent and be really, really, track time by the minute and whatnot. At some point, we're doing this, it's a managerial accounting perspective. So this is not for your taxes necessarily. This is to help you make business decisions. And part of business decisions is knowing when you have fallen into the details to a point that is no longer productive. So just be aware that it is good to get the best possible number, but don't go absolutely crazy on this. Like, don't try to get it to like the cent, for some of these things, like how much fertilizer do I use? And then you're measuring tiny bits. So do your best job on it. It is math heavy. We do not have you use your product and for the activity. We have you use a sample product. So that was intentional because we wanted people to not feel uncomfortable sharing financial information. If you want to go through, oh, Pamela, it's so cute. If you want to go through the process with your own product, we highly encourage you to do that. It's very important. Another thing that I would caution you about is that when you're doing it with your own product, there is of course a tendency to think, oh my God, this is a really high cost of production. How am I ever going to make a profit? We address pricing and like scaling later on. So at this point, don't get stressed out if it comes out with a high cost of production. We will address the pricing portion of it later. So with that, unless anyone has any questions, I am going to let everyone head out for the week. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up?
Nope.
Okay. Well, have a wonderful week, everybody, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.